Okay, guys, so we're going to look at plants and multicellular living systems. So, multicellular, multiple cells. You and I are multicellular organisms. And there is kind of a hierarchy or a structure to the complexity of organisms that we look at. And so, everything starts at the cellular level. So, a cell is really the building block for organisms, for you and I, and for different species and living bodies. And so, with a cell, if you have a number of cells that are working together, we then call that a tissue. So, a number of cells that are working together for a certain function, they will then form special tissues. And if you have tissues that are all working together, and so an example being your heart is made up of cardiac tissue or cardiac muscle, and all those tissues are working together for a common goal, for a function. And so a bunch of tissues working together make up an organ. And when you have organs that are all working together for a certain function, like your digestive system, for example, which makes up your mouth, your esophagus, your stomach, your large intestine, small intestine, rectum, anus, even your pancreas and your liver all incorporated in that. And so that makes up an organ system. Or your respiratory system, which is your trachea, your pharynx, your larynx, which is your voice box, and your bronchi and bronchioles, alveoli make up your lungs. So all those organs, when they work together, we call that an organ system. And so those are like your respiratory system, like I described, or your digestive system, or your circulatory system. And when we have a bunch of organ systems that work together, then we have an organism. We have something that's that's alive. It's performing all necessary processes. So this is the hierarchy. It's something that you would revisit in Bio 20 if that's something that you're taking. So it's important that everything starts at the cellular level, and cells working together make up tissues, and tissues working together make up organs, and organs working together make organ systems, and organ systems make up an organism. So knowing that is very important, okay? And so now when we're going to look at plants and their structure, we're going to look at two main organ systems. So a bunch of organs working together. It's broken up into two organ systems. For a plant, there's the shoot system, so that's everything above ground. And then there's a root system, so everything below ground. The shoot system is a lot more complex than the root system. When you look at a flowering plant, you're going to see the stem, you're going to see leaves or buds or a fruiting body or flowers. And so those are all making up the shoot system, where you'll see the reproductive structures and structures for photosynthesis. The root system can be very complex, and it's going to be present or take place in order to absorb nutrients and water, in order to adhere the plant to a surface. So as much as we might not talk about the root system, it is still very important. And so that's everything below ground. So here you can see the shoot system, okay, everything above ground, and then the root system. Some of the functions, I described a few of them, but your shoot system, it's where photosynthesis is going to take place. So that's the process of making sugars. So food, resources for the plant. It's going to store a lot of nutrients and products. It's also going to have those reproductive structures. And then your root system. So it's there to anchor and to ensure that the plant is safe and attached to a certain surface. And so it's grounded. Some reproduction can take place in the root systems as well, but mostly lots of nutrient absorption is going to take place at the roots, or exchange of nutrients with other organisms even. You can have some symbiotic relationships between plants and other organisms. Absorption of water, which will be really important, will come through the roots. So those are the two main organ systems, or systems of plants. Okay. Again, so your organ systems are going to be your shoot and your root systems. Those are the two big ones. And then we have tissues. So we're getting a little bit more complex in how we're organizing the components of a plant. And so the different tissue systems, just like you and I actually have smooth muscle, we have cardiac muscle, striated muscle. Plants have special tissues. And so the first one is the dermal tissue. And so it's found on the most exterior part of the plant. Just like you and I have what's called an epidermis. So it's a layer of skin, a layer of special tissue that obviously we can have the exchange of nutrients from our environment. We also can expel waste, salt, water from the pores in our skin. So plant has dermal tissue, which is the very exterior. It protects the plant from the environment. Then we have ground tissue, which is a little further in. There are a variety of cells within the ground tissue, but nothing overly noteworthy that's exciting. But your vascular tissue, that stuff's cool. And so vascular tissue kind of works like our circulatory system. And so vascular tissue transports sugars and water and nutrients throughout the plant, just like our circulatory system transports nutrients and water and sugars throughout our body. So we're very similar to plants in the way we're structured. Okay, not going to worry about cell division, but if botany is something that you're interested in, there are certain parts of the plant called the meristem, and that's where reproduction or cell division is concentrated and really takes place. Same thing if you guys have heard of cuttings, when we're cutting certain sections of plants, like if you have a bonsai tree or even weed. Weed, you can take special cuttings, certain parts of the plant, and replant them without having to work with seeds and germination. For cuttings, you have to take a special part of the plant, though, and that part would consist of the meristem, which is where that cell division is and where a lot of that DNA and information to make the plant is localized. So don't just go cutting a bunch of plants and hoping that they reproduce for you. But that's something that you could learn a little bit later on if you were interested in botany. So the epidermis, or that dermal tissue. So it's that outer layer of cells. And a term that's really important for plants is called the cuticle. And so the cuticle, you might notice it on certain plants, especially on the leaves, on the surface of the leaves, the top of them. It's this waxy substance, and what it does is actually prevents water loss, most specifically. So you'll notice if you look at aloe vera. If you look at aloe vera or cactuses, you'll notice that they're very waxy and their outer coat is very thick. And so they have a very thick cuticle because they are in very dry environments where there's a limited amount of water. So that cuticle prevents water loss. It kind of helps retain and keep a lot of that water in the plant, especially in harsh, dry environments. It also prevents predators or herbivores from eating the plants because it's not a very desirable thing to be eating. So the cuticle is very important, and it's found on that dermal tissue on the exterior. Ground tissue, I'll get you guys to watch 1 or 2 videos this week. So ground tissue is a majority of the plant. It's kind of the meat of the plant. And it's just located right below the dermal tissue. And it's loosely packed tissue, and a lot of what you're going to find there are like chloroplasts and vacuoles and cells that are allowing for gas exchange and for the production of sugars. So chloroplasts are those green pigmented cells that allow for photosynthesis to take place, and they're going to be found in your ground tissue. So here you can kind of see the very exterior, the dark green line would be your dermal tissue. And then the big kind of meaty portion of the center of this stem, it's a cross section. So just like I chopped off the top of a stem and I'm looking down underneath it or over top of it. So the ground tissue here, you're going to find a lot of your chloroplasts and vacuoles and cells for storage of nutrients and the creation of sugars. And then these nice kind of cute little bundles here are your vascular bundles or vascular tissue. And you have two kinds. You have xylem and phloem. Xylem transports water and phloem transports sugar. And so the difference between the two is very important. Here again, typically on your unit exam and then your final exam, I would show you an image like this and get you to label it or identify it with multiple choice. So the cuticle is the very top, and it's very important again for the prevention of water loss and predators. And then you have your epidermis or your dermal layer of tissue, which is also lumped in there. And then you have palisade mesophyll or spongy mesophyll. These are all your chloroplasts and vacuoles and larger cells that are making up the ground tissue. And then you have this vein here is depicting your vascular tissue, so xylem and phloem. And so just like our circulatory system, things are being transported through these veins. The bottom of the dermal tissue, so this is the bottom side of the leaf, you'll notice here these little openings or chambers. And so those are the stomata. And so stomata are where gases are exchanged. And so in order for photosynthesis to take place, the plant needs to be able to take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. And so these are little openings in order for those gases to be exchanged and enter and exit the leaf. Water loss would also occur here. So that is why they're located on the bottom side of the leaf. Because if they were located at the top, when it'd be really, really hot, evaporation would cause a lot of that water to leave the plant. So the openings, in order to not be so susceptible or prone to water loss, they're always located on the bottom side of the leaf, so not exposed directly to the sun. So our vascular tissue here, a couple of videos, are responsible for the transport of substances. And xylem transports and moves water from the roots up to the leaves so photosynthesis can take place. Phloem, and this would kind of be a trick question on exam, actually takes sugars not from the roots up, but phloem takes the sugars that are made up in the leaves and transports that sugar throughout the plant. So phloem is transporting sugars, and it'll vary in the direction that it's moving. But it'll move from the leaves, where the sugar is made, to the roots, so the roots can grow and that cells can be provided with energy in order to do their job. So xylem takes water from the roots to the leaves, and phloem takes sugar from the leaves throughout the plant to the roots. So this is just a depiction showing you xylem and phloem. Again, if botany is something you're really interested in, looking at these two or identifying the two under a microscope is something quite interesting. Xylem for the flow of water. These are not living cells. They're actually dead cells already. And they passively will take water using transpiration. And adhesion and cohesion are processes that allow for water to move up and down throughout these cells. Whereas phloem, these are living cells. And so they are alive, and they actually have openings or perforations. They're semi-permeable membranes that allow for sugar to move throughout in a certain direction. So, yeah. Some specialized cells that are kind of cool are there are lots of root hairs that allow for an increase of surface area. So underground in the roots will have little root hairs, like finger-like projections, that help with water absorption. The cuticle is also very important. It's kind of a specialized cell, and plants will adapt to their environment, and their cuticle will vary. So the thickness of that waxy layer depends on the environment. There are also some other specialized cells like trichomes and bristles and thorns on plants in order to prevent predators from eating them. So plants are really cool as to how they adapt in their environment in order to stay alive. Okay. So stomata I touched on were those little openings where gas exchange occurs. And so the stomata, stoma is singular, stomata are plural. They're like these sausage-like guard cells, and they're called guard cells, each cell on each side. And they open and close depending on whether the plant needs to release a certain gas or obtain a certain gas in the environment. And so this is what they look like. This would be them open and then they'll close. Um, they will also open and close at different times of the day. Typically, they'll stay closed during the day when it's really hot in order to ensure that they're not losing too much water or too many vital gases. And they'll open at night in order for optimal carbon dioxide intake. Okay? So yeah, they look kind of funny. But so those are the stomata, and they're always located at the bottom of the leaf. Okay? So those are the kind of large overarching structures of a plant. I am going to get you guys to do the check and reflect here, and next week we'll talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Please know dermal tissue, cuticle, ground tissue is where you're going to find all your chloroplasts, the storage of nutrients. Photosynthesis will take place in the ground tissue. And then vascular tissue, just like our circulatory system, is made up of xylem and phloem that transport water and sugars. Okay, so hope you guys have a good one, and see you later.